Kieran is recording the call.
Cool. So hopefully that's recording. Welcome, Wargamers, to a review video for the Battle of Borough Dur 2020, which was a tournament that ran down at Badminton Cafe in London, being run by Sam Palmer. You're here today with me, Kieran Street, with my good friend Sam Page, and with Chris Dan, who also attended the tournament. How you guys doing?
Yeah. Very good. Strange to be doing a video again after so long.
Yeah. Would also point out that we're not just talking to each other on Skype because we are far away from each other. It's also because of the lovely lockdown that we're currently under.
But mainly because we are so far away. Mainly me.
Mainly it is. Cool. So hopefully this recording will work and you guys can see everything. We are going to go through to my army list. Chris, I believe you've already done your video on how this went for you.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. In fact, I think I even listened to them, but I couldn't quite remember. Anyway, so this tournament had a very interesting format, and that was because you had to split your army into two. You had to do a basic force, and you had to escalate that for your last two games of the day. So you played two of those games at 400 points, and the other two at 700?
650.
Was that 750?
650.
650.
Screen.
Yeah, I'm looking at the totals. Anyway, I went with a really unusual choice, which I've also done this very short video about, in that I put half my army list into Elendil and then filled his warband up with as many warriors as he could take. That left me at 390 points. The only extra war gear I could have taken would have been a shield on Elendil, which I refused to do because the model looks way too cool without it. You know, extra equipment, but all of my warriors already had pretty much everything they needed anyway. When I went to the 650, I slapped in Isildur with his own warband, and that was pretty much it. So Elendil, Numenorian banner bearer, and then a solid mix of shields, spears, and bows in each list. And then when I added Isildur, pretty much just the same thing. Numenor currently don't have a great deal in the way of war gear options. So, going to the pictures from the day. Now, hopefully this will work, being the first time I've tested it. Can you guys see that?
Yeah, just about.
Just about. I do have a slideshow function on this, but I'm not sure if it will actually help any. But anyway, so as you can see, this was the deployment for my Numenorians in the third game. First game.
What was again? Was it Reconnoiter?
Yeah, this was Reconnoiter, and I was up against the very, sorry about the quality of the pictures, but it's kind of difficult to both play and photograph at the same time because you don't want your opponent to feel like they're losing out because you're taking pictures. But yeah, this is my little warband of with Elendil at the back and with a row of shields, spears, and bows. These were the single Numenorian warband that I had to try and win Reconnoiter with up against the Corsair list. So I don't know if you can see at the background. Those are Corsair Arbalesters. Just a little ahead of them is one warband of Corsair Reavers, led by a bosun. And over on the other side, I'm not sure if they were deployed at this stage, Dalamir showed up with his own warband of Corsairs. I'm not sure they outnumbered me quite 2-1, but they were pretty close to it. Elendil was easily worth like an entire warband of some of these guys. And of course, they have throwing weapons. And the Arbalesters are pretty nasty. So the way this kind of worked was when I was going into this, I was lucky in that my guys didn't show up late. They showed up on the first roll. That was good for me because it meant that I could get into the center quickly. Now, you might wonder why I was so eager to run straight into the face of a load of crossbow fire. I know from using my Isengard list just how bad that can be.
Well, let's not talk about that.
When you've got quite a small force going up against a really big one in Reconnoiter, assuming you're going at the same speed, one of the things that you don't want your opponent to be able to do is to start branching. So what I mean by that is, if I can take the battle to the center and then spread out in response to my opponent, it stops my opponent from branching all of his units off and like just going to both corner, and then it puts you under strain to cover everywhere at once. So if we roll on to the next picture, there you can see Dalamir's boys have turned up. This was against not David Clubley, but his brother James. I did really badly during the day because at one point I stopped being able to tell them apart. So sorry again for that, James. As Chris can attest, I was a little bit unwell at the tournament and sneezing away, but made a full recovery afterwards. So yeah, I've moved my Numenorians up to the centre of the field here. They took a couple of casualties from crossbow fire as they went up, which wasn't great, dropping my 19 mob force down to about 17. And then you can got the Corsairs who essentially moved up as well, and the battle basically took place in the centre. He did split into two. So not sure what I've got in the next picture. Yeah, in the next one, I've moved Elendel over to this rock on the side. You can see a couple of Corsairs over here that were trying to sneak towards one of the board edges. This group here has mostly got Reavers and the Corsair Bosun. These are the lovely Arbalesters. And over on this side, you have got Dalamir and his warband coming too. So the reason I put Elendel here was upon seeing my opponent put those two there, I was sort of wondering if Elendel could maybe charge into one of them, get a sneaky heroic combat off, and then swing back into the middle. But my main reason for putting Elendel so far out to this side was to just make sure that these two, whatever happened, they would get caught, knowing that this lot had a little way to go before they were suddenly a problem for me. I've got a couple of guys over here. Originally, that was maybe to just sort of threaten his own flank and try and see if I could get a single model off. But as things turned out, they ended up taking the battle to the Corsairs. So, again, not the greatest of pictures, but if you look down here, you can see Elendel, who came into the battle line when most of the Corsairs charged a few small number of Numenorians I left here. Again, the image probably isn't the greatest. I'll try and zoom in a bit for you. You've got Elendel here, a couple of Reavers. You've got maybe 3 to 4 Numenorians there up against all of the... Oh no, hang on. Ignore me, I've really jumped ahead. Sorry, that's Elendel dismounted. Okay, so quick story short, there must have been a bit of a gap between these pictures. Up on the other side, the Numenorians formed a little roadblock between this wall and this house. This was mostly because this warband of Corsairs went straight through this gap. I was a little bit surprised when they all just piled in. I was expecting a few to go around and put me under strain. But instead, I just made a roadblock here, and that worked really well for a while. If nothing else, it meant that I could slow up quite a large number of models. My big fear on this side is when these two went around this side of the wall, I thought they were going to go straight for the board edge, but instead they piled into the combat troops I'd left. On this side, Elendel did do really well initially. He went for one of the Corsair Reavers, heroic combated, managed to kill the Reaver, tried to get in on the Bosun, but couldn't due to the position of the defensive Reavers that the guy that James had left around his Bosun. So instead, I just charged one of the Reavers and hoped to win the heroic move off next turn. The main reason I was after the Bosun at this stage was because of the Bosun special rule, which means that if the Reavers are in range of the Bosun, they can choose whether to pass or fail a courage test that gives them a little buff. But if you kill the Bosun and take him out, it stops the Reavers in their tracks. They have no option but to take that courage test. I was kind of relying on killing the Bosun and then hopefully having the Reavers take out some of his own men. Again, when you're outnumbered to this extent, it's really difficult unless you, really try and push the battle onto your opponent and reconnoiter. It didn't quite go as planned. Elendel lost a crucial combat. So first of all, he lost the heroic move off. The Bosun charged him. Then a bunch of the Reavers piled in. Elendel himself, I think, he was either dismounted by a throwing weapon or he was dismounted in combat. Can't quite remember, but either way, he actually survived this combat, but wasn't able to do any damage to the Bosun. Moving on, you can see again on this side, I've got the Numenorian roadblock, just sort of trying to close off this side. Just some sort of minor skirmishing really going on this side. I did not have a lot of men, so I was relying on Elendel to do a lot of the heavy lifting. And just unfortunately in this game, he just didn't really seem to do a lot. He got dismounted. I think he maybe killed maybe 1 or 2 Reavers, but not a great deal beyond that. Sorry about that. So I think this was pretty much the picture from where the game ended. On this side, the Numenorian roadblock had just finally been mullered. The combination of Dalimir and the outnumbering troops just meant they really didn't have a hope. Even if I'd split off one of the spearmen from this side and tried to run for that board edge, I wouldn't have done it in time before the game ended. And on this side, unfortunately, Elendil died in combat. He got surrounded and had that horrible backstabber all piled on top of Reavers. It came down to whether he could pass a 50-50 on his fate roll. I think he may have even had a point of might left in his store to try and do it with, and he just failed. So this flank was a complete wash, with pretty much all of my warriors slain on that side. And the Arbalesters here didn't even really need to get involved beyond the first couple of turns. So in the end, I felt quite happy because in spite of being outnumbered, I stopped the enemy from getting a total landslide by, getting models off the board. But it was a pretty comprehensive defeat with my leader and army being broken, with my lead dying and my army being broken. So that was Reconnoiter for me. I believe you won this game, Chris?
Say that again, sorry?
You won this game, did you?
No, I lost this one, similar to you, where it was the breaking and leader kill against me. There was a key note about the tournament, though, is that it was the 40k sort of scoring system, the 0 to 20. So it's very much about denying PPs.
Yeah, I have to admit, I only skimmed the rules pack before actually turning up, and like the scoring system in it anyway. And it was something like the narrower you could make that margin of victory, the better you were doing, or at least it was always better to, if you were going to lose a game, to lose it by not many VPs compared to being wiped out.
Yeah,
there were people who won 2 and lost 2, but pretty high above people that won 3 and lost 1, because they scored better when they won and denied a lot when they lost.
Yeah,
so it's all about the scoring more wins. So you did well to sort of minimise the defeat. It was sort of the most you could do with that, really.
I'm not really sure I could have played it much more differently. It was potentially a mistake to leave Elendil with so few men to support him. Alternatively, maybe if I'd been lucky, I could have just heroic combated Elendil off of one model and then sent him straight towards the enemy board edge, trying to get my leader off the board to score at least the Reconnoiter victory point, and then maybe just run my army away, forcing him to chase the breaking victory points. But the problem is, even if I'd run my army away, it would then have been on those Numenorians to try and stop the entire army of Corsairs from escaping. And I really felt very wary in this game about if I was going to get rid of one model off the board, it being Elendil, who is 200 points in a 400-point match. So, wasn't the best of starts for me. That was a loss right off the bat. Not as bad as it could have been in terms of victory points, though. Moving into the next game, as you can see, that was fought on Helm's Deep.
You carry on. I'll be right back.
Yeah, sure. So, Sam, are you still with me?
Yeah, I'm still here.
I'm sure why Chris is appearing in the middle. Oh, there we go. How are you?
Whoa,
cool.
My eyes. There we go. I'll go back a bit. There we go.
So I'll try zooming in a bit for you. So this was fought on a very decorative board with Helm's Deep. We were given the option of playing on a different board if we wanted to, because it is very specific in terms of the layout. Yeah. Now this one was one of the new scenarios. I think the one involving relics on both sides. I can't remember what the official name for it in the match play guide is.
Yeah, I don't think I played that one.
Essentially, you've each got a relic in your side, and you're trying to get the enemy relic and then drag it back to your side.
Right.
So, and then you can get bonus victory points if you can get it all the way off the board. But it is a really tough one, because when you consider the amount of ground you have to cover.
Yeah, especially with a time limit, that's rarely going to happen.
So, my opponent had a very unusual Isengard list. He had a bunch of Berserkers, led by Mahur, with a couple of Mahur's Marauders.
Mm-hmm.
He had the rest of his force was pretty much done lendings. He had all of three of the heroes, so he had the Oathmaker, Frida, and he also had what's the name of their newest character? Not Thrydan, but
Gorulf or something. Wolfsbane. I don't know. And
with him, he had a very large number of wild men of Dunland. That was pretty much his army. And the first thing he decided to do with it was he decided to split, sending his Berserkers out with a couple of scouts first. Mm-hmm. Really have to apologise because I can't quite remember the name of the chap I played. He was very, very nice though. I kind of got the impression he was a bit new to the game as well. So as you can see, I've got my black line of Numenorians over here with Elendil here. The first thing that I pretty much did was send Elendil straight for the Berserkers. In the first turn of combat, Elendil charged into two of the Berserkers. Did a heroic combat, won the combat, killed them both. Did a heroic combat. He almost lost the second fight, but I spent his first point of might to win that combat and killed the next two. The main reason being that I've, again, used Berserkers a fair bit, and I just know what they can do if you just let them go. So
they're still very powerful, even
they have even now. Their defense is blocked, but I mean they're still good. You know, there's still nothing trying to use them.
Yeah.
So over here we have got Elendil, who then took on one of the scouts, I think. Elendil was charged by one of the scouts, and he used this opportunity to run Mahur away. Mm-hmm. I think in the same turn, Elendil heroic combated off of the scout and then charged Mahur anyway, so he did capture Mahur.
Yeah.
At this point, I mean, I know my army is pretty much clustered around this singular the breach in the walls, but it's basically the sort of deployment they ended up with. Yeah. I kind of felt pretty bad because even though my opponent had picked the deployment, I think he'd kind of given me the advantage by letting me have this singular breach to charge through. So from this moment on, the game, I kind of pushed the battle into the center. Like if I really wanted to game it, what I could have done was left 6 Numenorians watching this gap, and it would have been very difficult for him in the time limit to actually get anywhere near punching through them, especially if they had the banner behind them.
Yeah.
So instead, I just pushed the whole army up this way into his wild men of Dunland, who then chose to charge. I think the other issue was that's the last battle picture of that battle I took then. I think the other issue was he did a kind of classic mistake that you see from some new players, and was to split his army up, trying to think of attacking and defending at the same time. Whereas there's specific circumstances in which you'd want to do that with an all-infantry force. Especially in this game anyway, with the forces that he had.
Yeah.
So, this ended up being a bit of a skirmish in the middle. My Numenorians charged into the Numenor line, the Wildman line. Again, this is where the superior fight value of the Numenorians started to show itself off, along with spear supports and some archers. The archers didn't actually get much in the way of firing, then just ended up sweeping into the combat itself. I had a couple of archers on this side run this way, and a couple of archers on this side try and run that way. I think these wild men on the end, one of them managed to get around that battle line, and I had a couple of spearmen drop back to chase after them. As you can see that relic over there, in the end, Elendil did make it to the relic. It was done with a heroic combat and giving him a free 10-inch move. Before that point, my opponent did charge Elendil with Garroth Ironskin, and just for one turn declared the free heroic defense. Yeah. And that really was frustrating at the time because of all the models in my opponent's force that could survive facing Elendil. I figured that was the one because I just can't do anything to stop the heroic defense. So he stopped my heroic combat, and his 70-ish or 60-ish point model slows down my 200 one.
Yeah, that's no fun.
But my opponent made a bit of a mistake in that he had the opportunity to keep charging Elendel like that, but instead chose to split his Isengard heroes off onto warriors. I think in his strategy was he was going to heroic combat them back into Elendel.
Yeah.
But that really gave me the advantage because it meant that Elendel could then heroic combat off the wild man he was facing, and luck was with me in that happened first, so he went straight for the relic.
Yeah, got out of dodge.
So in the end, Elendel had the relic and dragged it as far back as he could. I think I managed to get a major victory off of that because I managed to cross the centre line and get it back into my territory, I think.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, overall, I think the real reason I won this game was that my opponent was maybe a bit new to how to sort of approach this scenario. And, just have the right sort of tools in the right place to sort of get what I needed to done.
Yeah, I also think that your opponent's army list is a bit odd. Like having lots of wild men without any kind of spear support just means that even though he's got the numbers, he can never really bring them to bear. And if, as you did, the berserkers, die early, he's always going to struggle.
Yeah, I think wild men have certainly been made more interesting with the addition of the oath maker, who makes them all fearless.
Yes.
What their niche place is, and I do think it is a bit of a niche with a defense 3 and fight value 3, then they're probably just a bit worse than orcs in terms of what they can do.
Yeah.
I'm sure they can work. The Oathmaker is pretty good, and having fearless troops is always pretty good too. But maybe they need to sit with like a bigger force, like something maybe in 800 points. You could easily take the Oathmaker and a contingent of wild men whilst you've got other stuff that kind of holds the line.
Yeah, well, I think they need some spear support. Some of the new I forget what they're called. The super Dunlandings, also the Hurskars, or some pikes, or something to back up the numbers. Just taking lots of wildmen, I don't think is ever going to be very productive.
So yeah, that was a pretty big victory for me and sent me up the tables a bit.
Nice.
On to as far as my army list had done in this game, I was pretty happy with it. There wasn't much that I'd change. I was really worried about trying to use Elendel in this sort of size game because he has so many points in one model. But it didn't turn out as bad as I expected overall. It was just that first game where not even the numbers really hurt me that much because I did manage to stop the enemy escaping. It was just the fact that I really could have done with Elendel passing that fate check and having only 1 point of fate and kind of let me down a bit there.
Yeah, could have done with rolling better.
Always my curse.
Yeah, roll more sixes.
So, on to the next game.
What do you think of the new scenario, Kieran?
Hey, we got Chris back. You still there?
Yeah. I have been here.
So, how did you find that new scenario?
I was too early, so I need a couple more run-throughs of it, I think. I played a fairly new player as well who didn't massively understand the game initially anyway, let alone bring a new scenario that I didn't understand yet, really. I like the idea of it. Changed something a bit different, but I think the next one I preferred more.
Yeah. So, moving on to the next one. We have got... that's the point. Can you remember what the names of both this one and the last one were called?
So that one was Retrieval, something like that?
Yeah,
something like that. One is definitely Battlefield. I can look it up. I have it on my laptop, I think. The next one is definitely Command the Battlefield.
Yes, or as people are jokingly referring it to, when you've got the whole ground one that just involves taking the centre, this is hold everywhere else.
Yeah.
The last one was
So this was a pretty interesting one to begin with for me. So this was up against a Isengard force. This had one of the new dreaded siege weapons. I say new; they've always been in the game, but at long last, they're actually pretty damn useful. So you can just see an Uruk-hai siege ballista over here. This entire line is composed of Uruk-hai crossbows. In front of them, we have the brave Elendel and his warband. Down here, we have the archers from that warband. And we have a bunch of Wild Riders there as well. When I said Elendel, this just shows how good my pictures are. Sorry, that's a banner bearer.
Yeah, so Elendel's down here with the Wild Riders.
I keep looking for a horse, assuming it's going to be a big model, and yeah, just every game I play him with, he gets dismounted. So yes, that is Elendel down there. And up here, although you can't see them very well in the shot, you've got Lurtz with a bunch of Uruk-hai with shields and pikes, and against them, as another little thin black line, you've got Isildur and his warband. And these models over here, those are... Sorry, just see if I can shift some out of the way. So those are a few Numenorian archers who went running for the far table forces from where they started. So I only had 2 warbands in this. I was lucky in that my opponent went first in terms of deployment. The reason that was lucky was it let me see where most of them went. So he got his Isengard warband here, and he got his his Lurtz warband here with the banner. His crossbowman came on here, and his bolt thrower came on here, or ballista, I should say. Mm-hmm. I put Elendel's force here because my initial plan was don't ever have to walk into 12 crossbows worth of fire with Rasku. It's not going to look pretty by the time you're done. So by deploying so close to them, I was able to charge them quite early on. Over here, I deployed Isildur. Now, I had a real big struggle with deciding where I was going to put Isildur when he turned up. Part of the reason was, in a sense, I wanted to put them in this corner, and I just wanted to overwhelm this bolt thrower by the get-go. I chose to put them here, basically because of this massive rock. And the idea was, whilst it seems really tempting to deploy in this corner, the problem with that is that the enemy turns around and all of a sudden you're trapped in the corner when the objective of the scenario is to get out there. So in this sort of setup, I've got one warband here and one warband here. I'm pushing the enemy into its own corner. This proved a bit problematic when the Wild Riders turned up late, because then they started off behind me and they were looking to get a charge early on. I think, to be honest, when this has been taken, this after movement, so my force was deployed here, moved up to the crossbows, who moved back, and then my archers moved down here to take on the Wild Riders, along with Elendel. Now, the reason for that split was I was fairly confident that these guys could hold against the crossbows for a bit on their own, and the idea was to try and shut this bolt thrower down. I kind of overlooked a couple of the finer rules of the bolt thrower itself. So I had all my archers and Elendel charge the Wild Riders over here. The reason they made that split was that I didn't want the Wild Riders to just have free reign. If they started the game and could just run for the corners, there's no way I'd catch them. Don't have a captain in this, so no direct march. Only have 2 mounted heroes, and they pretty much got to stay with the infantry for most of the game to do anything. So Elendel charged in. The first thing that happened was this bolt thrower hit him. Or rather, he hit the combat that he was in, which dismounted him. I don't think he took the main hit because I think that scattered onto one of the Wild Riders who just got annihilated. But it did take his horse out of the game, which was pretty critical. I thought that by having my men here, this prevented this bolt from going this far. But if you actually go down to a model's eye view, the top of that bolt is actually higher than the battle line. And when you look down it, Elendel mounted the square in the sights of it. So that was a little bit of error of judgment on my part.
Yeah, won't be making that mistake again, that's for sure.
Hell no. So let's just move on to the next shot. So this was what happened with the Wild Riders. Elendel did manage to think in the next turn the bolt thrower missed. Bear in mind that the bolt thrower had no better target than the 200-point model that Elendel is. But in this round it missed, so Elendel was able to kill a couple of Wild Riders in heroic combat and some more. There was a Wild Captain, which I think is this guy in the middle. Sorry, Orc Captain, which I think is this guy in the middle. But I'm pretty sure Elendel made short work of him. Meanwhile, the fight against the crossbow seemed to go really well. I think in this turn things are fairly even. And I think Vrasku did a cheeky direct combat here, looking to get to the banner, which was why I'd left this spearman exactly here, just to kind of add a bit of a barrier for him to get that reach around. I think even at full reach, he could only get to like where my mouse is hovering here now. So this spearman was pretty crucial at the time.
Mm-hmm.
What else we got? This is the battle for the massive rock. As is typical for me, Isildur lost his horse like to the first combat he was in. I could have
should probably just not take a horse.
To be honest, while I could have used a point of might to win this fight, in retrospect, I actually wondered if this was a good place to even bother putting Isildur. I could have just left the Numenorian warriors here, and then sent Isildur round with his horse to basically start picking off the lone Uruk-hai who tried to make breaks for this gap here. Maybe even going to Lurtz looking for a leader point. I don't need to keep Isildur alive. He does need to keep Lurtz alive because Lurtz is the leader. Even if Isildur had gone the long way round, odds are he would have been trapped though by this backline of pikes. So swings and roundabouts, it really is a hard call because if he leaves these guys and all of a sudden I need a heroic combat. Oh, just to let you guys know, that little barrel isn't terrain, it's just a marker to show us where the halfway line is. And as you can see, my Numenorians are fighting very hard to stop the Uruk-hai going across it, because that's another quarter of the board.
Yeah, I guess also if you had sent Isildur off on his own, he becomes a target for the ballista. Because obviously it can hit him a lot easier if he's by himself.
There's that as well. So again, this is just a shot from the ballista's perspective. From that point, if you put your head to it, it can see over the heads of these guys, which was a bit unfortunate because it meant they can keep firing. This thing really throughout the battle turned out to be in huge pain for me. So here we have things as they looked at the end. This model, is that still the captain? May have been the captain. But he managed to... Actually, I'm pretty sure it was just a Wild Rider. Either way, this was definitely a Wild Rider, and it managed to escape. It just got the move off, and basically managed to get this far away. I could have sent Elendil after it, or maybe one of the archers, and maybe that's what I should have done. But instead, I was thinking, maybe I can afford one Wild Rider to escape. I've got... at this stage in the other parts of the field, I had two archers going for each of the back lines. So even if that guy does get into one of the quarters, I still outnumber him. Mm-hmm. So instead, I tried to pounce on this guy and get a heroic combat off. That resulted in a ballista shot hitting the combat, knocking everyone down again. Because with the Wild Rider, you're really not going to care, are you?
No.
Anyway, so we end up with this Wild Rider dismounted. I sent Elendil back off this way, thinking, right, okay, cool, let's get him back to where he's needed. Let's win this fight over here, kill Vrasku, maybe get onto that bolt thrower. How far does Isengard bolt thrower scatter?
6.
3.
Isengard bolt thrower? Scatters 3.
Yeah.
So when that thing fired at Elendil, with this guy being 3 inches away, I was really lucky that the next shot from that thing missed. Because if it hit, Elendil would have been taken out of the game.
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily, but he would have had to have spent his singular fate points to try and resist it.
Yeah.
Anyway, things went really well for me here with the Numenorians. Somehow they just had one of those magic turns where they just were able to go 6, 6, 6, killed a load of crossbows. Over here, the Numenorian line was holding pretty well. I was taking casualties, but inflicting them as well. Numenor are really quite well pointed up to take on Isengard toe-to-toe. Mm-hmm. Mostly because they're defense 5, so they're just above 4, that stops the Uruks winning them too easily. But they're also strength 4 themselves, which means even an Uruk-hai with a shield is being wounded on a 5. A little way. So this was more of a wider shot that I took. You can see I've got 2 archers here. These guys are going for the furthest quarter. These guys are pretty much just camping out here. My opponent's got the odd Uruk-hai who's making the break for it as well. either that or that was a casualty, but I'm fairly sure that was a model in play. I've got Numenorian Archer here who's looking to line up a shot on him too. That bloody bolt thrower is still in the corner firing away. Yeah, it's just starting to ramp up, getting a little bit tense. We're not really sure who's got this point bag. So, Elendil back in the combat to where it's harder to hit him. This archer staying out of combat, so if the bolt thrower does hit, it can scatter onto him. Up here, the Numenorians are still doing pretty well, holding the crossbows, but, you know, they are running out of time. They really could use Elendil in the mix. Oh, and Vrasku fighting the banner in combat. That's always fun.
How did that go for the banner?
This Urukai made it round. One more turn. He's in combat with my archer, but he actually dies this turn to a couple of Numenorian bow shots. It's always handy. Moving on. Oh, that's the last shot from the game, it looks like. So, how did the game end? Well, Elendil did survive. He didn't get hit by the bolt thrower. One of the reasons for that was we were running out of time. The fight here, whilst it went really well for me at one point and I killed a load of Urukai, it started to slowly swing back as the law of averages came back and the Urukai started winning Numenorians. This bolt thrower, on the last turn of the game, shot into one of these archers, knocking him into another archer. My opponent got the scatter on a 6, so he got to pick the target. Took both of them out, leaving me with one quarter down. I'd moved 2 of the other archers into this back quarter, hoping to secure it. The Warg Rider got in there. So whilst I did get a victory point from that, by the fact he had the Orc Warg Rider in there, it was still not great for me. It wasn't as many victory points as it could have been. Over here, the thin black line next to the fight for the rock failed at the last. I still had a Isildur left, and he'd spent most of his might and was still fighting in combat, but he alone couldn't stop the Urukai pouring into this quarter. So the game pretty much ended with me holding this quarter just off the screen with a couple of archers. This one, he just about took, I think, because he had the Warg Rider in it and my guys in it got shot. I did have 2 archers left up here, but they weren't enough to outnumber the Isengarders who poured through this gap here. And yeah, pretty much the bane of my entire game was this bolt thrower, only because it slowed Elendil up and just really caused him to be a menace to him.
It does seem like siege engines have become very, very popular recently.
I mean, I know this was this tournament was before then, but the grand tournament had siege weapons up near the top tables, something unheard of in times long gone.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to see a siege engine in a list that isn't, the Assault on Helm's Deep Legendary Legion. Just shows that they are, still pretty viable outside of that.
That was the difference in my last game, and not the GT tournament. Was that damn ballista?
Yeah, those Iron Hills ballista are crazy bonkers.
So, yeah, I'm one of those as well. My last 2 games. Yeah.
The big question I was left with after this game, as important as it was to box my opponent in, and any other game that could maybe have swung it, because, it was just this line falling that let this lot through. If I'd had maybe a few more 6s here or managed to get Elendil involved up here, that would have given me more men to start sweeping in on them. But was my big mistake from deployment, should I have just put a warband behind this lot here to take out the siege engine?
I think...
but I probably would have done the same as you initially and just rushed those crossbows and penned them in,
I think knowing how, crazy good the siege engines are, I would have definitely, pounced on that warband, wiped it out, got rid of the siege engine, purely for the threat because it poses to the entire board. Even if, as long as it's alive, it can shoot you pretty much. Obviously, it has to see you as well.
After what it did to Elendil, being a big target for it, and also it basically winning the game by taking out my 2 contesting archers of this side.
Yeah.
We worked it out, and it was something like... also worth mentioning, by the end of the game, I can't remember if my force was broken or not. if it was only by a couple of models. But my opponent was something like 3 away from breaking. And we worked out victory points. This difference was really on a knife edge. It was pretty close. Like a 2-point victory swing to my opponent. And that was all down to the siege engine getting in the quarter. So,
well, I mean, hindsight's wonderful. But I think if I ever see a siege engine in a maelstrom scenario, you've definitely got to jump on it and try and get rid of it as quickly as possible, because the closer you are to it, the less it can shoot you. I think does it have a minimum range? Minimum range of 12. What was that? The old blue source book.
I think the trebuchet still has a minimum range. I'm not sure that any of the ballistae do.
Right.
Again, this my takeaway from this game is, for my homework, is to read up on siege engines and learn a hell of a lot more about what they can do. Maybe even take a list of pieces one. That's the quickest way to learn how to.
Yeah, well, I'm currently staring at my shelf that's got a part-built Mordor catapult on that I'm wondering if I can repair and bring back up to full function for whenever our next play.
And the other thing I'll quickly touch upon before we move on is that just Isengard is such a good list. I've always been a fan of the Isengard list. It's one of the lists that I've used the most and won the most games with myself. So it just has all the tools you need to do to win games, really. Really good stat lines on its basic troops and great heroes. Right, moving on to this game. Quickly, Chris, how did you get on in this game?
I lost this one to David Farmer. He also had an Isengard, which was a mix of Berserkers. He had Gorolf, he had Saruman, Ratu, and Wargride. So super strong, super quick, and lots of numbers. So I think that was a point for this scenario as well. Although he beat me pretty convincingly, scoreline was still pretty close. Same as yours. It lends itself for a close game.
Cool. As far as the new game went, I quite enjoyed this one. Like, if you can play whole ground, I think you can play this game. I think it really just sort of changes the areas that you're going for and makes it a bit difficult to just go for 1 point, which I kind of like. It does become it's not just about having a strong presence in one part of the field. You've somehow got to get control into multiple sections of it. So I pretty much enjoyed this one. Even though it was a loss for me, it was a really enjoyable game. Just had a lot of... it was quite high pressure trying to cover all the angles at once. So, next one for me was a lot simpler. This was Contest of Champions. And I have Elendil.
Best scenario.
And my opponent's champion is Groblog. So this was the initial deployment. This was up against a chap called Danny, who just seemed to have a really quite good attitude to playing. I played him again a bit later at the Not GT, which we'll talk about in another video. He had a really big Moria force. It had Groblog as well as a Cave Troll, which you can see in the shot there. A couple of Bat Swarms, and it also had a Cave Drake.
Ooh.
As well as a Goblin Shaman, I think. And the rest was pretty much all the classic Moria thin line of goblins, shields, spears, you name it.
That's nasty.
As you might expect, Elendil opened up things with a good old heroic move followed by heroic combat. He managed to get to Groblog on either the first or second turn. It was pretty early in the game and basically just rolled over him like a tank. So on the first turn of the game, I'd achieved pretty much all the victory points in it, which is to kill your opponent's leader with your own leader.
Yeah, which is worth 7, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I do have to admit that I didn't necessarily approach this game with I want to play to the best of my ability. It was the last game of the day. I was feeling pretty rough with a cold. And I just wanted to have a bit of a fun one. So whilst I sent this lot... straight after Groblog, it was really just because it's very difficult to do anything else from the deployment in this one when you start 3 inches away from each other.
Yeah, and it's also very hard with contests to do anything other than, send. If your leader is better than their leader, you almost have to send them after it because there's not a lot else to play for.
Yeah, I mean, it is worth noting that Groblog does have heroic defense, so he could have made it difficult, but think he just kind of went for the strike and just assumed that he was going to lose. So obviously you've got a big goblin line around there. Most of these goblins end up falling beneath Numenorian blades, and the cave troll is the next target for Elendel. Not because Elendel is well placed to take it on, but I just felt like charging the cave troll.
Well, why not?
Meanwhile, this is still deployment. Cave Drake on this side, Isildur over here. What I would have maybe done if I was really trying to win this game was maybe had Isildur start here somewhere. But it's the last game of the day, and I was just looking to get him stuck in somewhere. I really wasn't gaming it too much. Mm-hmm. My opponents got the Cave Drake in right here at this point of the line and went for a heroic strength followed by a hurl, which knocked down pretty much most of the Numenorian line. It was pretty funny. Got a lot of this flank decimated just by the fact the Cave Drake was here, and I didn't really have an answer to it because Isildur was deployed quite badly for it. Isildur ended up trapped against a bat swarm and various other things for most of the game. He would have died at one point, but managed to essentially do just enough on his fate to not take any wounds. Over here, just more goblin killing. The Numenorians pushing really heavily on this flank. The cave troll being the only thing slowing me down, and the goblins getting in the way of Elendel, the only thing stopping me from taking out the cave troll. Back on this side, decimation from the cave drake. Bat swarms going in on. That was it. Bat swarm and wild marauder on Isildur. As you can see, a bunch of my troops still on the floor thanks to the cave drake.
Did Isildur put the ring on?
He can't take it.
Oh, can he?
You can't have the ring with Elendil. Which is why, at the moment, I think you're seeing a lot more Isildur with Gil-galad, who doesn't have that restriction, than you are Isildur with Elendil.
Yeah, I remember. I remember now. +1 for theme, I guess.
Yeah.
-1 for Isildur tricks.
Well, I love the terrain that we're playing on because it looks really cool. It is so difficult to balance models in this style game. Maybe it's a bit easier. You're playing something a little bit different, but it's just all those steps.
Drake balancing on the edge.
So this is a bit of a classic shot that you see from certain games, and that's where you each hit each other so hard on one flank that the game kind of turns sideways. So I think we've taken this shot just after the cave troll has died. Either that or he's between the two pillars. But I think he was essentially on those steps when Elendel charged him and finished him off. The cave drake just went sweeping up one side, looking to get at Isildur. Isildur's still alive and on the field, even though that wild marauder did cause him a lot of problems and almost killed him. These guys up here run out of goblins, come this way to try and take on these ones. And that's pretty much how the game ended, really. There wasn't much to report beyond that. I think we both had a lot of fun with it. Lots of stupid little things happened, like, the lone goblin who hurled off like 3 Numenorians for 2 turns in a row. I was really happy Elendel managed to get in on the cave troll and finish it off. Isildur had no right to still be as healthy as he was by the end of the game, but hey, sometimes you get it that way.
Yeah.
Overall, had a really fun game of it. Was quite happy with my lists. It did feel like a captain would have been useful, but it's just because I played this list at 700 points and the captain it's the fact that you've got 2 really big, powerful heroes in there. The captain kind of picks up the bits that you don't want them to deal with. So when you want a heroic move, you can heroic move with the captain and save their might. Elendel, great as ever. Having a sword that's +1 to wound is just amazing. Being able to heroic combat off of it as well. The only thing I will say is that playing with him at low points does make him a big target. If you're ever up against a siege engine, even in a big game, there's nothing else they're going to shoot at, because why would you when you can try and take off and there's only 1 fate point in the way. Isildur, just solid. He's very similar to Elendel without the heroic combat or the +1 wound. He's got very similar stuff. Obviously, if you take him with the ring, in a list that doesn't include Elendel, his versatility goes up quite a bit. I think most people would be more tempted with Gil-galad, and then you've also, rather than running pure Numenor, you've got High Elf backup as well for like value 5s and things like that. Yeah, I had a really good day of it, and was absolutely shocked to realise that even with 2 losses, I'd managed to come 4th place.
Nice.
That was no small part due to, I think, I got 2 best sporting votes, and in this format they kind of like bunch you up a bit. So yeah, I was pretty happy with that. Pretty good day's gaming, and 2 victories for Numenor, and 2 close losses. Well, the first game was a bit of a wash, but the second game was definitely a close loss. It was only a couple of victory points in it. So yeah, overall I was pretty happy. Chris, how did you end up overall in that one?
So I finished 11th, I think, in the end. Just because when my losses are victories were quite similar points-wise, but in that last one I was against the Cat army, and Ugluck managed to outkill a Candid Chariot. Yeah. I get 2 kills to 1.
Right.
Actually, that was man of the match because he was trapping the other chariots, so getting +2 to wound against them was pretty insane. The Grishnat took out 3 chariots always by himself.
How did you find the Legendary Legion you were using overall?
I think my first tip would be you don't have to use the 8 inches because you have it.
I could say so much, but I won't.
You can, but because the orcs did run away from the orcs very quickly, but you don't have to be moving 8 inches all the time. It's just handy to have to either wrap around once you've hit the battle lines. But that's something it's definitely to learn. It's not a particularly easy one to use. It doesn't have that big hero, so there's a lot of things you couldn't answer. But it had plenty of shooting, plenty of numbers, and plenty of might. So there's a lot you can do with it. It's just hard to utilize it properly. So a bit of learning. It was really fun though. So
yeah. That's pretty much what I found with Numenor as well. There is a little bit of a learning curve in using them because you always feel like you don't have enough men. Even when you haven't taken, like, if you take a Sildor and a couple of captains, it's still quite difficult to feel like you've got a lot of men on the field, I think. But they're solid enough. The only thing that really sort of you notice with them is that they're defense 5 and not defense 6 like you have with Minas Tirith. But yeah, their fight value 4 and their strength 4 do make them amazing melee troops. It's just, can you survive long enough in a lot of cases? So I tend to find that I've always had games where I'm struggling to not be broken, if that makes sense. Whereas don't seem to have that much difficulty most of the time in breaking the enemy. It's just not breaking myself.
I found that with the legendary scouts, their killing potential is insane with their bonuses and whatever in their heroes, but they will die. Everything is defense 5 across the board.
So I think that's pretty much it from me, unless you guys have got any particular mistakes or errors that you noticed, aside from not knowing how siege engines can threaten you and how to deal with them.
Yeah, I don't think you're old enough 6s, to be honest. I think if I was given some critique, I'd say roll more 6s.
Yeah, well, as you well know, that has always been my bane.
Fact, well, I think that's all of our banes, except Chris. Chris always rolls 6s.
When I went to the Alistair once said to me, if I got someone else to roll my dice for me, I'd be GBHL champion.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not wrong.
Anyway, that was our short vid that turned into almost an hour's worth of recording. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it. How would you have played those games? Was there anything that you could see that I didn't on the day? I know it's really difficult from the pictures that I've taken, and I'm notoriously bad at taking pictures, but I do make the effort. Hopefully I'll try and improve on that. We will be seeing you again at some point, I'm sure, with a review of the next event that we all went to, and that was the Not GT, run by Joshua Friffett over in Epic. And yeah, we'll give you a full review of that with the lists that we took. Say that again, Chris?
And was partially run by Sam.
And partially run by Sam, yes.
Well, yeah, spreadsheets are a thing.
Right, guys, I will catch you later. Thank you for watching. Remember all the jazz, like, share, and subscribe. And game on.
Bye. Oh, Chris has gone.